Today, I'm gonna show you how you can use a couple dollars worth of dollar store things to make your car handle better. Stay tuned, you're gonna wanna watch this. Hit the subscribe button! Again, thanks so much for watching. We have reached 1,000 subscribers. Absolute monument for me and Teamrocketgarage. I appreciate every single one of you. It snowed earlier, so we have to do something before we can do our celebratory video for 1,000 subscribers. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down there. You're going to want to see it. I have worked on many cars on my channel and you should check that out. But to celebrate 1,000 subscribers, as promised, I'm going to do a burnout in every single one that runs. This one doesn't run yet, but I'll do a burnout in it later. What we're gonna do is we're going to do some very basic math, and I'm gonna show you how to do this to make our car handle better. And I've got some awesome stuff for you, so make sure you stay tuned. It's even kind of themed in mind with the Sentra, which is a big channel car, right? I want this car to handle, I want it to outdo my wife's Miata, and will it? I don't know, but I'm gonna try. So without further ado, let's head inside and do a little bit of math. And this is what I found that I need to modify to make my car handle better. But I wanna walk you through how you can do it on your own. Now, I do have some visuals here, so I'm gonna show you some of the math first, and then I'll show you how it works so you can go out to your car and make some adjustments that'll make your car handle better. All right, so we've got some basic tools. 90 degree right here, we're gonna want that. We need a protractor, a ruler, and a compass. You're gonna want a handful of measurements. You're going to want the length of your control arm, the length of your shock, the angle of your shock, and then the position of the top shock along the control arm itself, as well as the angle of the control arm. The Sentra has a control arm 12 inches long. That's from the ball joint, that's the point of pivot, to the bushing, the other point of pivot. And then we've got the shock itself plus the spindle. So that's the distance between the top hat and then the ball joint that we measured on the control arm. So that's the pivot axis. And that is 22 on the Sentra. So what we need to do, this is the circle. Now this measurement right here looks like 10 centimeters roughly. So what we do is we go from the center here, that hole, to there. That's our flat line, right? That's gonna be our 0 degrees. Now our control arm, we need to find out where it is on that axis. Now on my Sentra, because it's lowered and the geometry kind of sucks, it's actually right here. And then when I found where my shock tower mounted, it was kind of in the middle. So if we call this right there, and that's 5, so it needs to be roughly double over here. So that would be 10, which is roughly 4 inches, which is right there. So that is the mount for my shock tower. So now we've got an angle that represents the mathematical layout of the shock of my Nissan Sentra. And then you've got your tire right there. So this right here is the most important thing. This is your window, and it's doubled. This is your window of camber recovery is what it's called. It's also camber gain. So when your control arm moves up this axis, this actually shoots outward, and I'll show you this in just a moment. It shoots outward and adds camber to the tire, but at some point the tire starts losing camber. So let's jump into a visual representation. This is the layout of the suspension on my Nissan Sentra. If we've got our shock tower right here, and then our control arm. So we'll put a tack in right there, and that way we can rotate this. We'll just ignore that for now. Perfect. And then we've got our shock tower mount. Now we've got a visual representation of how the suspension on my Nissan Sentra is working. So there's a few things here that we want to consider. Now, the wheel itself on a McPherson Strut like this is adjustable on its own. It can mount on here negative, positive, or positive, negative, whatever, but that changes when the angle of this changes itself. So one thing you want to see is this right here. You can actually see that we've got this line right here that it's pivoting on, right? And that means that this is actually moving inward. This distance gets smaller when this goes up. And it's hard to tell, but if we do it at an extreme level, you can actually see that this is losing camber, right? So we're going from, we'll measure this right here. I guess I could have used the white background, but so we're gonna set this as our 0 right there. So that is perfect 90 degrees. So when we move up, we'll move up. You can see right there, we've actually lost camber. So if my car had 2.5 degrees of camber to start with, static camber on the wheel, it comes up and adjusts in because this is actually, this control arm is pulling inwards this way. So if we're measuring right here, we are at about 92 degrees. So 90 and 0 are basically our zeros. So we have lost 2 degrees of camber, but in order for this to happen, the car has leaned and compressed. So this whole thing rotates like that, meaning that we're losing like 5 degrees of camber and going into a turn with basically negative 5 degrees of camber, even though we started with 2.5 degrees of positive camber. So how do we fix this? Well, there are a few ways to address this. First off, the more that this axis here is inward, if we go all this way in a super dramatic position, right, we'll say right there. Perfect. So you can actually see the angle of this changing visually. That means that because of this dramatic change in position for the shock assembly, now all of a sudden this car gains camber. And camber is the car's ability to overcome or to maintain grip. Because this is a normal car, the car does have coilovers. We can't adjust this down. There's an engine right here, a battery in front of it, all kinds of stuff that make this not possible. But I do have coilovers on this car. So what we can do is we can max out our coilovers in this direction. So at this flat position, now we are measuring, let's see, that would be 80 degrees. And then if we come up one here, in fact, I'm just gonna write a line right here so I have a reference at 2 separate points. So if we shove this back in, we can actually see the suspension compressing, and we wanna measure this position as well. So we wanna be flat on this line. We're 1 inch up at about 79 degrees. So you can see that essentially the camber is staying the same because of this angle. Now, what can we do to actually increase the amount of camber gain? So now that we've gotten rid, by manipulating this position on the shock tower, we've gotten rid of our camber loss. However, what we need to do is increase our ability to gain camber. See, now we're basically 0 camber gain here, so the wheel is moving up and down and maintaining 2.5 degrees on the suspension. So what we're going to do is we're going to either lift the car, or more ideally, we're going to add what's called a roll center adjuster. That's basically an extended ball joint that moves the location of the control arm down. So if we go ahead and take our right here, and then we'll do this in kind of an extreme. So this is the location where our wheel is mounted, but we've now moved the control arm down. So you can see the angle of the control arm has changed dramatically. In fact, we've dropped the control arm about 10 degrees here. So because of that 10-degree drop right here, this control arm, instead of traveling inwards like this, right? So if you've got this position right here, the control arm is moving this way on the ruler. But if we come down here, now all of a sudden the control arm is moving outwards because it's rotating out here instead of in while it's orbiting this mounting point. So that's our roll center adjuster. So now we have a suspension that gains 2 degrees of camber in the same amount of suspension, which means that because of these very, very simple modifications and very, very cheap dollar store items, we're able to do some research that allows us to model our actual suspension here in real life and see the actual changes. And these measurements, as long as they get larger or smaller to the same amount, the ratios stay the same. So your percentages and your degrees won and lost are going to be effectively the same. Comment below if you think that there's something that would help your car, and I'll respond and we can kind of go back and forth about it. Regardless, now we know what we need to do to fix the Sentra's front camber issue. Now that we know what we need to do to tune the camber on the front of our Nissan Sentra, I'm gonna order some parts, and I'll see you next week when we start talking about caster on the Sentra, which is pretty much as important as camber. It's like camber, but forward, backward. And I think that we're going to create the absolute best Nissan Sentra in the world here on Team Rocket Garage. So thanks for watching till the end. Like and subscribe, and have a great day. This is a brand new AutoZone control arm, and typically it looks like that. However, I cut the end of it off.